and have been fighting for this bill called the Dream Act that would grant them a worker's permit and residency, a green card, and a pathway to citizenship so that they can go to school here, become citizens, work, get driver's licenses, and all that stuff. That bill hasn't passed. What did pass was an executive order from the president back in June of 2012. And so basically what that executive order said was that any child who was brought here before June 15, 2012, before the age of 16 or 15, I can't remember how old you have to be, but you have to be brought as a minor, and you have to meet all sorts of requirements. You have to prove that you've been here a long time, going to school. You have to prove that you're basically a good moral character citizen, that you speak English, that you've been to school, that you're a minor, and then you can apply. You have to pay about $500, $465, I think to be exact, for this application, and then you apply, you send in your paperwork to USCIS, the United States Custom Immigration Services, I can't remember. But it's basically, it's a branch of immigration, right? And you send in your paperwork there, and if they approve you, you get a worker's permit. And it's a 2-year worker's permit. So we're going on to our 2nd year, so a lot of students are about to renew. But before it went into implementation, like back October 2012, Governor Brewer said, well, if you get workers permits, you can have a workers permit and you can have a Social Security. But in my town, you're not going to drive. So she basically said, she made her own executive order because she was pissed that Obama had done this. She was so upset that he went and did this that the governor said, well, you can do whatever you want. I'm going to do whatever I want in my state. And I'm not going to give these students driver's licenses. So any student right now who has this worker's permit, everywhere else across the country, they're getting driver's licenses because that worker's permit allows you to have lawful presence. So in the country, and you're allowed to work, and you're allowed to have a social. But now these students have this huge barrier where they can't drive. So we filed a lawsuit. We're suing the governor. I think it's one of the first times in the history of the U.S. that an immigrant youth organization is suing a governor. And it's all immigrant students, undocumented students who obviously now have their workers permits, but they're fighting to get a driver's license so that they can drive just like everyone else can drive. So there are certain requirements that you have to meet, but the Arizona Dream Act Coalition is who you can look them up, Arizona Dream Act Coalition. You can call me. You can send parents to call me at the ACLU, and we can give them the resources on where to apply. And there are different organizations that are doing it for free, so children and students shouldn't have to be paying for that to fill out the application. There are attorneys that do it sometimes in some situations where if the student has a criminal background or has gotten tickets, or some kids are steal stuff from stores or get in trouble or smoking marijuana or get caught with like problems and have some misdemeanors, they can still apply in certain categories. Like they accept and allow students that have certain amounts of non-aggressive misdemeanors. So, as long as they haven't been convicted of something crazy, then, they can apply. And then it's up to the USCIS to decide if they qualify or not. And then in that situation, those students would need an attorney. So they would probably have to pay someone to do that for them. So yeah, there are resources out there. We know that there's a lot of students who are really skeptical about the program because they're like, I'm going to be in a database in immigration if I apply for this thing. And it's only a 2-year program. I don't know if I want to get myself into this database because what if they try to deport me? When Obama leaves, is that executive order still going to stand? Is that executive order still going to be there? And so a lot of advocates are saying, no, it's going to stay there. Like, it would be a bad move for the next presidential candidate to take this away. It's a good program. So the program's being renewed for a second time. So now the advocates and students that have been doing the work to try and get students to apply for it, who are doing the application drives for free, they're the ones who are saying, no, apply, you should apply, because it gives you access to work and you can go to school. So certain community colleges, so this is a whole nother battle that I don't know if you've heard of it, but these students also have to deal with school tuition. So sometimes, because of their workers permit, they can, in the school university system, in the like ASU, U of A, NAU, you have to pay out-of-state tuition, even with this workers permit, and even if you've gone to school your whole entire life in Arizona since you were a baby, even though you're undocumented, but you still have to pay out-of-state tuition. So this workers permit, a lot of advocates have been fighting so that these students can get in-state tuition because they grew up here, right? It only makes sense. And they pay taxes here and their parents live here and blah, blah, blah. The point is that the university system said no, and the community colleges said yes. So there's this whole, and then I think the Attorney General's office is suing Maricopa community colleges and I think Pima community colleges in Tucson for giving in-state tuition to people who have a 2-year workers permit, because they're saying that that's not legal status. It's this whole thing about words, and like that this workers permit is just lawful presence in the country, but not legal status, not legal permanent residency in the country. So that's where they differentiate and say that these students should be charged in-state or out-of-state. So community colleges are, fighting this lawsuit and fighting for the rights of students who have workers permits to have in-state tuition. Yeah. So it's a whole bunch of issues, a whole bunch of messed up stuff. And for that, the Arizona Dream Act Coalition is also working on that, fighting for tuition for students. And yeah. Any other questions? I know it's a lot. It's a lot. But what are your thoughts?
So the DACA would typically concern students who are perhaps 16, or you said
15. You can apply, I think, 3 months before your 15th birthday.
Okay.
Yeah, and then 15 and above, but you can't be over the age of 30, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
there's a gap. There's a window of who can apply. There's a whole bunch of requirements of who qualifies. So you can go on the website, parents can go and look it up, or you can send them to us or tell them to call the Arizona Dream Act Coalition. And there's a whole bunch of guidelines. They have a Facebook page too, but there's a guidelines, and then it tells you, like, it's very, very understandable, like very simple to understand. It's like, I don't know, I think it's like 7 steps that you have to look at, like 7 requirements, and then you can qualify. So like you have to be brought here as a minor before a certain date. You can't be over the age of 30 to apply for this program. You can't. So there's a lot of like yes and no's, so who qualifies and who doesn't. So like a 13, 12-year-old wouldn't be able to qualify for this program. I don't know, what are you thinking? You're so quiet.
I think I'm just letting it all sink in because I didn't know there were so many layers to everything. And I had heard about like the fundamental parts, well, not really fundamental, but I guess like the most basic parts that are affecting our students immediately, but I didn't know about all of the, the higher levels of this. And also the part that I was stuck on still though is thinking about the point of having SROs in our school. Originally I thought it was to educate our students on the law, because that's kind of, that's what I've seen our SRO at our school doing. I have never seen her arresting someone or attacking someone or anything, which I really like her. But when I think about it, I didn't grow up in Arizona. I grew up in Florida, in Miami, and Miami's a pretty tough area too, and I've never seen SROs at the schools there. I've only seen them if someone is like, if there's someone who doesn't belong in the school trying to get into the school.
Yeah.
And so my view of police officers at school was that they're there to protect the students, but it seems like here in Arizona it's the opposite. And I didn't realize that until you're kind of just more explaining the whole extent to what some of these situations are taken to. And it's just, I don't know, I'm just thinking about it, just how scary it is, and I can understand why a lot of kids will choose maybe to not go to school especially if they or a close family member are undocumented. But then at the same time, if you don't go to school for a certain number of days, you get charged anyways. You get a fee and you have to go to court to defend it. So either way, you're still getting screwed, basically.
And the whole thing, it's like full circle, right? It's like,
Yeah.
why do we have, and we didn't used to have SROs on school campuses. Back like 20 years ago, there weren't any school officer, resource officers, but immediately we started to see an increased number across the country. Because of the shootings at schools and all these other things, people started, and teachers were big advocates of like, yes, cops on schools will feel safer. But it kind of backlashed a little bit because we started seeing a huge number of kids being sent to juvie. Mm-hmm. And so that's the school to prison pipeline. That's where it starts.
It seems like it was almost like it's taken too far. Because I understand like the point of having, I also, as a teacher, feel safe having a police officer or someone in uniform, even if it's a security guard, but to make sure that everything like, that no intruders come on our campus. I don't want them there to arrest my kids. So, I don't know, and I think that's where it's gone like the other way, right?
And that's why we need such great policies in place, and we need very explicit like rules and guidelines and regulations with to set these things so that doesn't happen. Because I think everybody in this room doesn't want their kids being questioned or doesn't want their kids being taken at all for no reason, whether it's immigration or a discipline issue or, you know, that kid probably did something really bad. You know, but still, like, there should be other measures and other ways, right, to take care of the kids and these issues. So yeah, no, really good point, very good point. But then again, going back, and if you do your own research a little bit more, you'll find like, you know, learning, like, you can just Google, like, tell me about School to Prison Pipeline, or like, what are the numbers? When did this program, or what? It's not really a program, right? It's kind of like this illusion, right? It exists though, it's a very real thing. So, but there's really not something concrete that tells us like, this is the School to Prison Pipeline in session, you know? It just kind of happens, right? It's kind of like the push of students, of pushing students out and into the incarceration system. I don't know if you all know, or like if you learn in your classes, but from what I've heard is that if by fourth grade students can't read at a fourth grade level, their prisons are already
I heard it was
figuring
determining
out
number of beds.
Third grade.
By third grade, if they can't read by a certain level, at that grade level, they're already
That's how they determine.
they're determining the number of beds in prisons.
Yeah, based on third.
That's the School to Prison Pipeline. That's the whole issue, and it's like, no, kids learn how to read, but no, right? And it's easier said than done, right? But it's just like our kids are going through so much shit, so much poverty, and so many issues, like single parents, and sometimes no parents, homelessness, you know, like hunger issues, kids can't even get something to eat at home, immigration issues, deportations, divorce, drugs, whatever else that our kids are exposed to in this world. And it's just like the world, and it's just in a really crazy space, you know. And I think teachers are the hope, and you all provide such a safe space, you know. And that's what schools should be, a safe space for students. So yeah, School to Prison Pipeline.
Well, it's super problematic too, like who gets targeted. Like I think the majority of the kids in your cases were students with special needs, and like students of color are often more targeted. And it's like
more targeted,
Yeah, what? It's just very, very, very problematic. Like because it adds this extra layer of, like, not only are we treating kids in very terrible ways and disciplining them in very terrible ways, but also like there's this extra layer of racism, this extra layer of not knowing how to work with these students from special needs backgrounds, and it's like, I don't know, it's it's a much bigger problem than just like an SRO on campus, or I don't know.
The Department of Justice just issued, they released a report, I think last month, saying that, you know, they're going to do whatever it takes to ensure that students of color are not being targeted, to educate and to have guidelines at schools, that kids, exactly like kids who have mental disabilities or kids of color aren't being targeted, right, more than other kids. And I don't know, they're gonna implement all sorts of regulations and are going to be sending things to schools and school districts and school leaders. So we hope that they're going to be implemented. And they also came out with some guidelines around immigration, and that immigration shouldn't be a barrier for kids getting enrolled in schools in K through 12. That was just issued, I think, last week. But it doesn't deal with the question of like kids being questioned at school about their immigration status. It just deals with like admittance or being admitted to school or registering your child to school. So a parent who's undocumented should never be denied the ability to enroll their child in school. And so that was the immigration guidelines that came out of, I believe, Department of Education and Department of Justice last week. So, I mean, we're seeing that, we know that they know. I mean, we're seeing these like national, you know, federal agencies aware of the problem. And so now it's just about the implementation and actual working with teachers, right? And working with your colleagues and working with administrators. And I think a lot of it has to do with just like with skills and career, personal development, and the fact that a lot of these teachers are just probably there because it's not a profession to them, it's not a vocation, it's a way to make money, and it's a way to get vacation off in the summer, right? And so for some people it's just a paycheck, for other people it truly is something they're passionate about. And so that's where we find, you know, a lot of the issues is some teachers just don't care and might not have like their own personal development, right? And a lot of sort of, I think sometimes maybe they don't have the skills, right? Like you may learn about how to teach a subject, but you might not learn about how to engage students in other social issues and how to be like aware of what's happening in their community and integration and like all these other cool concepts that you all are probably learning because you have programs like Teach for America that are giving you those skills and those tools to think about the bigger picture and like who your kids are. They're not just like this child that sits in class and learns, right? There's this child that can leave class and gets all these emotional blocks in their minds and they can't learn, and then they don't, you know, they're dealing with all kinds of stuff. So, yeah. So what are we gonna do about it? So what are we gonna do about it? I know, that's the next question. So we're gonna do something. We're gonna do something. Let me check what time it is. So we have, till what time?
7.
Okay. So we've been talking about creating a working group. I don't know if anyone would be interested in joining it, but basically we want to form a group of people that are wanting to learn more about the subject. We have this really cool nonprofit here called Puente Human Rights, and they're doing a lot of the deportations, and they're helping to stop deportations of immigrant family members. They have a lot of cool art projects and art programs, and they offer just different programs there. And one of the really cool things is that I was asking around trying to figure out who's doing school to prison pipeline work in Arizona, and there's no one. I couldn't get names, but this organization is starting to do it. They have a group of youth. They're like, oh, we're starting to meet up. We went to a conference somewhere else, and we learned about this, and we want to work on this because we know it's an issue here, and we know it's a problem. So Puente Inc. is, and I invited them here, but they didn't make it. So they're starting a little group of people as well with youth and teachers and community members that want to start talking about this issue, do presentations, and as well as the ACLU. We're really interested in this issue because, again, it connects to our immigration enforcement issue in schools. And so that would be a branch of it, to pass school resolutions and friendly, you know, student safety, student protection guidelines and issues that we can sort of help to pass and implement, with whether it be with school boards or the School Board Association or the Department of Education. But to basically pass policies to help us. So I don't know if anyone here would be interested in doing that. I don't know how much time commitment is going to require. I'm sure it won't be that much. But, you know, if you'd be interested in doing something like that, I'll pass out a sign-in sheet and then you can sign up. And then I'll call you when we have a meeting. But basically it's these youth from, and some members from Puente Inc. that are going to start reading about this, and myself and anyone else in this room. So really it's starting from scratch on this issue. And me and Michelle sat down, we were talking, and we're like, she said she did research, we've been trying to figure out the numbers and trying to do the research. And so there's like national numbers and there's information out there. And some states might have organizations that are focused on it, but we don't have really anyone doing that here. So that's the first step, is creating a working group of people interested in the subject and interested in passing policy or being an advocate. You know, sometimes you might not even have to be the researcher, but you could be like, I'm a teacher, I have an SRO, this is interesting, why? You know, just someone who will be willing to stand up and say, I'm a teacher, I want the best for my students, and this is what I believe, I think is right for my students. So sometimes you might be brought in as an expert or as a teacher, just your voice as a teacher being like, when I first heard about this, this shocked me, oh my gosh, I don't want this, right? And so it's as simple as that. So that's the first step. The second thing is, if you have a big immigrant population in your school, you can call me and we can set up a Know Your Rights training at your school for free at whatever time. I go to anywhere you invite me to at any time. And so we schedule it around parents' times, and we do presentations. They usually last about an hour, hour and a half.